Thanks for setting that whole thing up, by the way.
My pleasure.
It's a really beautiful property.
Very fortunate.
How long have you been up here?
For 4 years. Before that, it was a lot of traveling. Paris, Ecuador for a long time,
Wow.
Hong Kong.
That must have been amazing.
They paid for the house.
Welcome to Table to Stage. I'm Jordan Worma, and this is my podcast. So what we heard a moment ago was a brief interaction between two characters, Richard and Seth, in the opening scene of Erik Bloomquist's new film, Long Lost. Erik is a Connecticut native. He's a Trinity College and London Dramatic Academy alum, and his credits include writing, producing, acting, and directing for film, television, and the stage. So Erik is a master of suspense, so I won't be the one to keep you waiting. Here's my conversation with filmmaker Erik Bloomquist. Where are you from originally?
I grew up in Newington, product of the Newington public school system.
Oh, all right. Did you spend a lot of time there after school, or were you on the road to get to the next thing after you finished up?
I did a handful of professional acting when I was in late middle and in high school, but I was definitely very much a presence in the high school drama club and musicals. I did like 10 shows at Newington High School.
Oh, wow.
And had a great time.
That's a ton for a high school.
Yeah, it was like a play of fall and a musical of spring, and then a couple of other special events, like in junior, senior year, like one-act plays or something.
Yeah. How did you first get interested in acting? What gave you the bug?
I think it was just always something that was part of me. It was the kind of thing where I would corral my cousins to do little skits in my grandparents' living room at every holiday gathering, themed for the holiday. And it all started there. And I think that it just was a natural extension that my parents saw. And I ended up doing more youth theater and community theater, and then some really, really great kind of pre-professional community children's theater at the University of Hartford, Hart School Community Division, which led to me doing some professional shows or pseudo-professional shows or college shows at Hart when they needed a kid. And then I just kept moving and meeting people, and the passion was fueled over time.
Yeah. Did you go on after high school to study acting or theater?
Yeah, I was
at additional levels.
I was a theater and dance major and music minor at Trinity College.
Oh, okay.
In Hartford.
How'd you end up with the dance minor?
The department.
Did you dance as a child?
I did. I mean, the department at Trinity is actually the theater and dance department, and so that definitely was a chunk of my major. But I did grow up doing primarily musical theater, which then turned into some more straight play acting, which then progressed into film acting and directing. But my roots are definitely in musical theater, and I have a lot of friends that still do that. Yeah, not that I don't do that. I direct a fair amount of musicals now, and I'll occasionally still perform in musicals, but it was definitely much more frequent when I was a kid.
Sure. Now, you said that you kind of progressed from theater to film, but that's not always sort of an automatic or natural progression for people. Was that a conscious decision that you decided to try to pursue a film career?
Yeah, I mean, it was
or did you just kind of stumble into it?
I guess kind of both. I like telling stories to this day, and I always have in whatever medium I can, whatever role that makes sense. And so as opportunities sort of trickled in and presented themselves, I pursued them with the help of my parents. I always say I pulled, they didn't push, but they were always right there. And, I did a series of anti-bullying videos when I was in 7th grade. And I think that was my first real direct experience with a professional film set. And then just bit by bit, a little bit more through high school. And I ended up just wanting to tell my own stories, and film was a great medium to do that. And my brother and I, who co-founded my production banner, Mainframe Pictures, and we produce all our projects together. We did little movies growing up, little 2-minute, 3-minute things, sort of like we did with plays on holidays with the cousins. We would do it ourselves, or when people were over for play dates or whatever. And we made a nice little preteen filmography, and now we're doing some big boy stuff.
So did you start writing at that same time when you were doing your 2 or 3 minute little videos? Were you writing scripts and stuff at that time too? Yeah,
we were doing seeds of scripts, or probably like very, very rough drafts. And then a lot of it was improvisation as well. But I definitely wrote little plays when I was a kid. I went to summer camp at Camp Eagle Feather in Rocky Hill. And there was one summer, I think I was 12 years old. And, we had a great drama counselor who saw how fired up I was. And I ended up writing the older campers skits for each session I was there. There were 4 sessions. And in the last session, somehow I convinced the drama counselors and the camp at large to allow me to sort of, write a full camp adaptation of The Wizard of Oz, where each age group was a different chorus. The little ones were the Munchkins, then we had like an Emerald City chorus, then we had like whatever it may be. It was a different age group for each one, and each group rehearsed their scenes separately, and then it was just this whole big camp thing at the final parents' night campfire event of the summer, where it was just this full camp musical, which they had never done before. And that was sort of my brainchild at 12 years old. So it was really cool to, like, at that age, have people that like enabled me, I will say, to do that stuff. Yeah.
So if you're 12 years old when you're doing this, what are the older kids at this camp? What ages are we talking about? Are we like 16, 17?
Those were counselor age, actually. The campers aged out at 13. There were counselors in training at 14 and 15, and then counselors started at 16. And I think we had, counselors going up into their, 20s, 30s. But,
all right.
So I was probably the second oldest camper age at the camp. And I think they just saw the vision. and they let it go. Yeah, it's really cool to look back on that now and even watch the video occasionally.
Yeah, that's a pretty incredible experience to be able to have, where you get a whole community kind of supporting you like that.
I won the drama award that summer, so that's
they probably retired it after that summer. I would think. So if you're that young and you're getting into already writing and directing, how did you sort of know that you were going to push all that stuff forward into hopefully what would become a career later on?
I think I had people who saw that in me. There was theatrically, I had a professor at Trinity who knew that I directed outside of campus and had professionally a little bit, and asked me to, if I wanted to direct Rent when Trinity College did that. And so when I was a junior in college, I was really fortunate to be able to direct a full departmental musical that this man musical directed, and be able to really have it be, my show as a junior in college, and to be afforded that opportunity. So that really opened the door theatrically for me. And in a film sense, that same year when I came back, I was studying abroad in London that spring of junior year, and I came back, and there was a movie that I had written, murder mystery, horror-ish movie called Founders Day, that I really, really, really wanted to make, and still do to this day. But at that point, I knew that I needed to get some kind of pitch piece together. So I said, okay, we're going to make a pitch trailer, a concept trailer on spec for it. So not having really produced a larger thing before, I just sort of jumped in and spent all summer and spring fundraising and writing and scheduling and getting people together that I'd worked with on sets that I'd acted on before, and getting referrals, and really just jumping in with both feet and making this concept trailer happen, and learning by doing and learning by osmosis from some really amazing technicians and crew members whom I still work with to this day. And I, continue to learn a lot from. And we made this concept trailer that did really well, and we sort of tricked a lot of people into thinking it was a real movie, and then that sort of was a spark for further mainframe pictures movies that we've been doing for the past like 5 years.
Wow. So did I hear you correctly saying that Rent was your first full production that you directed?
I did a few. I'd done a few before that. There was a production when I was a sophomore in college that I directed called Xana Don't, not Xanadu. Xana Don't. It's a pop musical where the conceit is that everyone where homosexuality is the majority, and like the whole world is flipped, where like the chess team is sexy and cool and the football team is like looked at as nerds, and so it was just sort of a commentary on that, but in like a poppy musical theater thing. So I'd acted in a production of that, and they relaunched that show, and the director wasn't able to make it back, and I ended up again, because even though I was very young, they invited me to come and direct that. So we did that in Hartford. We performed at a high school, but it was a professional show that had student matinees, and we had people coming in at night to see the show. But there was a huge amount of controversy about that, because there was a very quick like two-guy kiss in that show, and we made like national headlines. We were in political cartoons in the Hartford Courant for like 3 weeks. We were on MSNBC and Playbill, and there were protesters. There was like a woman running in with a Bible in the middle of the show, and news vans outside, and it was incredible. It was like completely unexpected, because it was so kind of an innocuous thing. And so anyway, that was, it was like, in hindsight, it was very cool. It was like, as like strange as that was, it was like really a cool experience, because the show like really blew up. And so I think my professor, who invited me to do Rent, sort of had gotten a little bit of wind about that. But in terms of Rent, that was definitely the show that I had the most resources for that I'd ever had. And it's something that I feel is very, very foundational for me. And I'm grateful to the tech team and the staff at Trinity and at Austin Arts Center who trusted and went along for the ride and are still supporters of me today.
Yeah. I've seen Rent, I think 4 or 5 times, and I saw it literally last night.
Oh, you saw it at the Bushnell?
Yeah. And I'm always sort of, one of the things that impresses me most about that show every time I see it is that it's so technically intense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So to kind of be thrown into that sort of a major production with relatively little experience behind it is pretty impressive to me that you're able to pull that off in that setting.
It's really cool. Yeah, I'm very. I like revisited some of the production photos from that show when Rent Live was on, just to do a little throwback, and it was cool. Yeah.
So okay, so you direct Rent, and what was the next project for you that not necessarily on stage? I'm sure there were plenty of stage things, but eventually you went on to really pursue film and on-camera acting. So what was that transition like for you? Was that as you were still in school, or was it after you graduated?
Right after I graduated Trinity, I was acting in 2 shows in a row at Hartford Stage. And in that time, I was planning to do, around that time, I started planning to do this short film of a script that I'd written a couple of years back, but never got off the ground, called The Cobblestone Corridor, which is modern day tongue-in-cheek film noir, a little bit like Rian Johnson's Brick, or mixed with like 90s Nickelodeon cartoons. The central conceit is that it's, there's a newspaper club at a prep school, and they sort of solve different cases. So I just got this stroke of inspiration that I wanted to make this movie. I just found the script on my piano, I think, when I was cleaning for Thanksgiving at my parents' house, and I said, I got to make it. So we did. We shot it in January 2015, 25-minute short film, and I edited it as I was directing a show. Trinity invited me back to direct a show the year after I graduated. Carrie the musical, which I think explains a lot of my as we'll talk about later, my for horror. So I was editing that, and then it came out in May, and it did really well, and it ended up on some video on demand channels, and the Connecticut PBS station picked it up, licensed it, and I didn't really know what was going to happen after that, but it did really, really well. And I started to think, wow, it would be really cool if you could serialize this in some way. So very, very long story short, I was able to, after a lot of talking and a lot of logistics, it ended up turning into what is now a 5-part series that is now pops up on PBS channels nationwide, and is an adaptation of the short film. And I worked on that for a year and a half. I created the show, and I wrote and directed it and acted in it. And that led to me. The show itself got nominated for 8 New England Emmy Awards. We won 3, Outstanding Actor, and then I won Outstanding Writer and Director, which was, I feel it's just so representative of the community of people that made that thing a reality. So that's a very, very brief version for what was a very, very solid chunk of my life.
Oh, I bet, yeah. But I mean, you say it did well, which kind of, it seems like you're underselling it because of the recognition that it got with the Emmy wins and everything. But specifically for you, winning the Outstanding Writer and Outstanding Director, did that open up any doors for you that may have not opened up for you at that time if you had not been able to produce that when you did?
I think that the thing with the Emmys is, I mean, it's obviously so intensely gratifying to have something like that recognizes the work, because I mean, there it was just so, that show is so intensely tied to my soul and my voice as an artist and as a person. And so it was a very personal and a very, very, very deep honor for me. And then, in a somewhat broader sense, it's an important legitimizer, I think, in conversation with people, because it is representative of, I think, you as an artist and a professional as a whole, because people can come up to you and say, okay, what do I know you from? Or what have I seen you in? Or what have you done before? And you may have an intensely long filmography, but they may not have heard of anything, or they may only heard of one thing. But if you say, oh, I won 2 Emmys, then, oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay, I understand. Like that's right. I think more linguistically transferable when you're in discussion with people that are trying to get to know you. So the fact that it's representative of you as an artist as a whole, I mean, I think that's why people, who are winning Oscars are crying so much, because of course it's the one role, but it's also like, it's the 20 years before they won that Oscar. It's every audition, it's every rejection, it's every small victory. And so that's, I think that it's definitely a good conversation starter.
Yeah. I'll bet. Now, the Cobblestone Corridor, you say is kind of a very personal thing for you. Is there any autobiographical material in it, or is it strictly, just the fiction from your mind?
It's definitely the fiction from my mind. I wrote the I just wrote it knowing what I like to see, and I made commentary on this idea that old and new are not mutually exclusive, and innovation is not synonymous with progress, which were big, important ideas to me, but wrapped up in this very fun, this fun way that I think had entry points for people of many different ages. We had 8-year-olds who were so drawn to the hijinks that we did in the show. Just characters like Brock Larson, who was played by Nick Moss, who won an Emmy for the role, or my character and Johnny Baker, played by Adam Wepler, who actually is the star of Long Lost, which is my new movie. There's this sort of like Hey Arnold or Recess quality to those things. But then you have adults who are really drawn to this kind of old school film noir aesthetic, heightened language, verbal sparring, ping pong match kind of throwback. And then I think that they both find a path to appreciate what the other group is seeing, and they kind of meet in the middle at the heartbeat of the show. So for me, that was so gratifying to it, is that we we had 8-year-olds and we had 65-year-olds who
Yeah.
had different things that they latched onto, but ended up appreciating what the other saw of value in the show too. And so it was such an interesting thing because people would ask about target audience, and I guess our target audience was 15 to 34, males and females, college age kids, some nostalgia, whatever. But
it's everybody's target audience.
Sure, but everybody, but there was something for everybody, and you can't really pitch with that. But that was something that was so meaningful to me, was that there was just the magic of the show and the nostalgia and the people involved and the setting and what we were trying to say. There's something for there's an entry point for everybody, and that really meant a lot to me, that it resonated in that way with people and continues to.
Did that kind of like maybe stand out for people when they were considering picking this up to run on the various stations, that the broad appeal that you put into it kind of separated from a lot of stuff? Because it seems like everything's really going for a niche these days, where the audiences are getting smaller and smaller, but more rabid about their whatever it is that they're drawn to. So if you're creating for a wider audience, that's kind of almost a unique thing these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think the what was attractive about this was that, given the target audience I mentioned, that in that market, it's sort of the gap audience, because a lot of people watch programming on PBS networks. If you're a kid and you're growing up in their children's programming, or you're an adult and you return for their documentary programming or Downton Abbey or their concerts, but you don't hear of a lot of 18, 19-year-olds, 17-year-olds tuning in to PBS and so there was something that it was intellectual without being stodgy, and it was edgy without being off-putting. So it sort of I think was hyper laser focused on filling that sort of gap, what is sort of a niche in that market. But in an organic way. I never wanted to do it in sort of like a synthetically manufactured in a lab kind of way, but just something that was very like true to my sensibilities and the sensibilities of my collaborators.
Yeah. Now it seems like just going through your filmography, and if anybody's curious, I mean, the IMDb page has quite a bit of information, but it really seems like you have a general draw toward really like the horror or suspense genres. Is that a fair estimation? And if so, like, how did that come about for you? How did you find yourself drawn to those different areas?
I like a world that is heightened and a little bit visceral. And so that's why I think I am drawn to the thriller, horror, suspense, mystery world, because I think that it's fun. I always say that horror awakens the imagination, and I think it is it's a highly social medium too, and it's somewhat cathartic, depending on how it's done. It's a thrill ride, and I think people like that, something that is not crazy detached from reality, but also isn't totally day-to-day life too, something that's fun. So I'm attracted to things that are somewhat social, that do promote conversation, or that you do enjoy watching with an audience. That is an experience if you're all in the same theater at the same time. So that, I mean, a big part of what I think is valuable about the medium is this idea of cinema as sanctuary, where the movie theater isn't just a random dark room. It's a place where you go and you can be put in a frame of mind, in a position to really experience something. And I think that this genre in particular is so ripe for that.
Were there any specific filmmakers or other artists and creators who inspired you along that path, like different films or directors or writers whose style that either inspired you or that you maybe tried to adapt into your own for a while?
Maybe subconsciously. I mean, I grew up watching a lot of like Scream is my favorite horror movie. I think James
all right.
Wan is an incredible, like, has incredible cinematic sleight of hand when it comes to haunted house kind of things.
Okay.
I watch, but then my favorite movies are very eclectic too. Like I love, I love School of Rock, and I love Back to the Future, and I love, I love Titanic. I think that they're just these big, sweeping stories with a specific vocabulary, I think, are just so interesting to me. So I watch a lot of stuff, and I think that I am always asking myself why something works or why something doesn't work, and trying to look at it from an academic perspective, but also from just like a general audience perspective too.
So what are the elements of a successful thriller that you really kind of think of immediately when you know a film's going to be successful? What is it that you're looking for?
I think that character is paramount. Character and story. I think if I try to make things, and I like watching things that are as big as they can be without the seams showing. So I think if you're going to tell a story, if you're going to tell a big story, it still needs to be rooted in the small, because I get desensitized if it's just big, loud noises and it's not rooted in character or story, because then it just feels
feels like a Michael Bay film.
But what I think when I think it works is that it is rooted in something, and that's what I liked about with Cobblestone. We always said it was high stakes at the micro level, so it felt big precisely because it was small. Okay. And I think that if you're gonna go big, it still has to be rooted in that. Like, you still have to feel big even when it's small, because it's gonna make the big feel all the bigger.
Right. I mean, something that's too big and is just grand in scale isn't going to be relatable if it doesn't hit you at a personal level.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it just has to be rooted in that. I think that's anything, and I think that's thrillers too, because then I think that we're, I don't want a passive audience. I want an audience that's leaning in and engaging and is active in what's going on and asking questions that. And I think what's very important too is that ambiguity is okay, but loose ends are not. I think that like you can leave lingering questions, but it has to be purposeful, and it can't be for lack of, you looking at every corner of this thing. I think it all has to be intentional.
Okay. So if you want to tell stories that deal with big things, but at a relatably small level, what is it about filming in Connecticut that appeals to you?
What I have loved about Connecticut is it's sort of this just great little pocket where, one, I know a lot of people. I've made a lot of connections. It's right in between two bigger markets, and I think that the community there has just uplifted the community here. I should say it has just uplifted the work that we've done in terms of their commitment to it and having pride in it and a personal stake in it in terms of donations or assistance or help, or people that want to come and be extras and just for the thrill of it, and people that are genuinely interested in the success of it. I think that's just part of the climate that I've experienced here, across the board, with locations, with background acting, with props and art and food. People like to be part of something like this. I think that's a human thing. I do it professionally, but I think I play pretend professionally, but yeah. I think playing and being creative is it's not a child thing. It's a human thing. And when people get a chance to be part of that, I think it's exciting. And I think that's particularly present here in Connecticut, whereas in a major market, it might be harder to get people excited just because it's easier to get desensitized and lose the magic. But I feel like the magic is alive here. In all of the stuff that I've done, I've found that that's the case.
Yeah. Now, did you have all that in mind when you were looking for locations when you started filming Long Lost?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, we actually had this location. The whole movie takes place in a single incredible mansion, which came on our radar through a connection with the Cobblestone Corridor. And The idea came, Adam Wepler, who is the lead in the film, Seth, and I were watching his episode of the Cobblestone Corridor, and we just started talking about, our creative voices and different things we wanted to be a part of, that statements we wanted to make and movies we liked and what would be different than Cobblestone. And we started like the seed of an idea of what Long Lost ended up becoming. And then we looped Carson in, my brother Carson, and we all just spitballed and wrote this story together. And then the house came on our radar, and we sort of tailored what we wanted to make and what we wanted to talk about around our existing resources, and wrote a story that took advantage of all of those things, location wise and otherwise.
Yeah, that location plays a huge role in this film.
Gigantic.
The house is a character of itself.
I'll give a quick synopsis if people don't know much about the movie. It's about a young guy played by Adam who gets a letter from a mysterious older half brother he never knew he had, inviting him to spend a long weekend at his mansion in the country. And at the mansion, the older brother has a live-in girlfriend who's much closer in age to Adam's character, and so there's this bizarre pseudo love triangle that sort of develops. And the thing we wanted to, that we were so interested in, was that relationship shift based solely on who's in the room. So it's three people, but it's like seven different dynamics. It's the group of three, it's each pairing of two, and it's each individual, and everything is different based on who's in the room. And so we wanted the house itself to be kind of a fourth character as the movie devolves into, something not so nice as it continues. So the house is meant to feel both infinite and boundless, but also claustrophobic at the same time, where you never really have a full sense of the geography, sort of like the hotel in The Shining or Oscar Isaac's estate in Ex Machina, where there is this.
Right.
It does influence the behavior of the characters. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, as I was watching it, the house itself, I felt very disoriented by it quite often because it was so, it just felt so large, and I didn't have a good sense of where I was in relation to the exits.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear.
And there was really this sense of tension right from the get-go when he gets into the house. The tension sort of builds to this crescendo, and obviously I don't want to give anything away, but there's this tension that crescendos right up into the last several minutes of the movie, and there's never a release. And I mean, the use of camera angles and the score really helps set it up. There's a specific scene where I wanted to ask you about the choice of the camera, because it's a scene where they're all at the table together, and it's shot from a slightly elevated camera angle, and the camera kind of shifts very, very slightly during the entire during the entire scene, and it's really disquieting. Like it really helped. It really had me unsettled as I was watching that interaction.
I think it sounds really promising.
I think you should change the name.
Why?
Why? Link? Sounds like you're saying your eyes are closed.
It's like giving you more clarity, almost. Your blinking is rejuvenating.
Link. No. Sorry. I don't like it. You making money?
Like I said, it's embryonic.
Okay, so no.
Well, I think it has potential.
So does a box of nails.
And I'm wondering how you came about that specific choice to have that little bit of a God angle, but not so much that you felt like an outsider. Like you still felt like maybe you're in the room watching this.
Yeah, you're picking up on it exactly the way we wanted to be picked up on. So that's awesome. So yeah, the scene is the lead character's first dinner there with his older brother and his brother's girlfriend.
Yep.
They're at this dinner table, and so he's still in his hoodie and his jeans or whatever, and they're like, they're dressed for a formal dinner, even though it's just like the three of them in a house, and it's like, that's weird enough, but we wanted to shoot it. All right, so I'll tell you the story. So we were going to shoot the scene standard coverage. So the shot that you saw was supposed to be the wide shot, and then we were going to go in and get close. We were going to get close-ups of each character, and then as we were shooting out that first shot, the wide shot that's in the movie, I looked at Thompson Wynn, who's my cinematographer, who I've been working with for 5 years and is fantastic. And I looked at him, and because I edit the movie too, and I just looked at him and I go, I don't know where I'm going to cut, and he just looked at me and was like, maybe don't. And so I walked over to the actors and was like, can we do this in one? And they were like, yeah, let's do it. And so we just ended up doing a 5.5 minute one shot for that reason, because I felt that cutting at any time would break the tension. And the way the angle is set up, it's like you are the unwilling fourth person silent observer at that dinner table who is trapped there watching. Yes. And I felt like by cutting, we would cut that tension in half. Whereas like you really are stuck there, because it is sort of a POV shot of just sitting at this long symmetrical table, and each take had a little bit of improvisation in it and was a little bit different. And so I felt that it was perfect in its imperfections, and I didn't want to mess with that. And so we didn't. And that's actually one of the shots that I'm proudest of in the movie. I think the performances are great, and I think the little subtle camera moves, I love what Thompson does there. And it just is meant to make you feel trapped. And I guess that's an example of both, like, it's there are no cut points, so it's sort of it goes on infinitely, but it's also like incredibly claustrophobic too, because you can't move. There's not that it's like a very high intense like violent scene. I mean, you're just like stuck at an awkward dinner table conversation, but I think that goes back to what I said about high stakes at the micro level, where it feels bigger precisely because it's just this weird conversation with these people that are like dressed up, and why are they dressy, and what's going. And so that was sort of fascinating to me, just exploring that dynamic and being stuck in that dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like I walked in to a conversation I shouldn't have been there for, and somehow got trapped and couldn't leave. And like,
bro, you are saying exactly what I want to hear. That's awesome.
So that scene I really found fascinating. And there's like you said, there's no action, there's no violence, nobody's hitting anybody, or there's not even any raised voices, but the tension of the character interactions and the room they're in and the viewpoint of the viewer really help to really set sort of the tone for what the stress of the film is going to be.
Yeah. And we were trying to play with the dynamics about the shifting interpersonal dynamics too, because in the previous scene, the lead character meets his older brother's girlfriend, and she's in a towel in the bathroom, and he stumbles in and is super embarrassed. And there's this weird kind of like quasi dorm room flirtation, awkward thing that happens in there. But then at the dinner table, suddenly she's like household matriarch, and he's dad, and he's like home from school. But then he leaves, and like the dynamic shifts back subtly to a kind of strange borderline flirtation. And then she leaves, and he's left alone. And so just this idea that the climate of the room changes, even though nothing else does. The only variable changing is who's present in the room.
Sure.
Was fascinating to me, Adam, and Carson when we were thinking of the story.
Yeah, there are a few scenes in the film that really stood out to me, as far as just the use of the space and the camera to really kind of help set the tone. But that was the one that I wanted to mention specifically.
Thank you.
Now, you already mentioned having worked with Adam Wepler previously, but Nicholas Tucci was also a part of Cobblestone Corridor, if I remember correctly.
He did the original short film. He and Adam both were in that short film. They had never met on set, but they knew of each other's work because they'd both seen the movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've been around since early days.
So what about those two guys specifically made you want to bring them back for this feature film?
Adam and I have very similar creative sensibilities, and I think he's he's very versatile and effortless in what he does. And then knowing Nick is such an intense, committed, creative presence in a film, and I loved working with him.
Oh, he's super intense in this one.
Yeah, super intense. I mean, he's definitely. I mean, he's best known for his horror work. He did this movie called You're Next, which was very big. I mean, it continues to be. It's very culty, and it's a great movie. And he just did the last season of Channel Zero, The Dream Door on Sci-Fi, and he's very much known in this genre. So I wanted to capitalize on that, but also subvert it in a way, because he's playing a character who does have a real playful side. Even it's a very dark side. It's still very dark and strange and uncomfortable, but it's definitely playful. And I wanted to tap into sensibilities that I knew he had and I knew that he was known for, but add multiple layers of stuff that I knew he could do and do just as well and just as creatively, and just make it a really fun thing. And I knew that he would bring a ton to the table that wasn't even on the page, which he did. I mean, 90% of his improvisations made their way into the movie because they just made so much sense. And he ended up being a creative producer on the film too, and adding his voice in that way. So I love working with those guys, and they were on the brain from the beginning, just knowing their sensibilities. I tend to work with actors multiple times. I'm in no way equating myself to a Nolan, but just in the way that like Chris Nolan does that. We're like,
you got to get Tom Hardy on the next one then.
Yeah, we'll see if he lets this podcast.
Right.
Anyway, I have a very loyal bunch, and I'm very loyal to them, and I love collaborating with people whom I have a mental shorthand with and a creative shorthand with, and it's just really great to do that. So they were just on the brain, and then the rest of the pieces fell into place, and that's how that happened. But it's very helpful for a project, any project, but especially one that you shoot in 10 days, like we did with Long Lost, to have people.
You shot that in 10 days?
Yes, sir.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it was a crazy fun time, but to have people that you trust implicitly and that trust you and are excited for the work. I think that's the only way things like that can happen.
Yeah, I did want to also mention the one thing that really stood out to me about Nicholas Tucci in this film. I got a very Patrick Bateman vibe from him throughout the entire thing.
I think he's gonna love hearing that. I'm gonna text him right now.
And not that I'm saying he was, doing a Christian Bale impression or anything like that, because it's far from that. But that same sort of wacky, creepy, I don't trust this dude at all vibe came off of him right from the get-go. And I really enjoyed that weird, the weirdness of that character.
Yeah, I mean, we that was something. I mean, we wanted the audience to be like, for most of the movie, to just be going, why? What?
Yeah.
What? I don't, because he's so his personality switch over the course of the movie. I mean, it's so polar opposites. It's like gregarious frat boy to introspective business tycoon to kind of like manic depressive, like recluse. Like it just switches, and you're literally like going, why? So right. I that's what I want, is audience members leaning in, actively engaging and asking these questions, and then hopefully they feel that it's there are no loose ends, that we do answer those questions. But I think it is a fascinating character study, but it is something that I love that people really enjoy watching twice, because without giving anything away, it is definitely it is a very different movie if you watch it a second time. If you ever watch it a second time, I mean, you'll see, because
oh, I'm sure there's things to pick up on.
There are things to pick up on, and I think, again, being careful not to give it away. You're watching it from a different perspective,
sure.
And so you'll knowing the answer to the why, I think, makes it a very interesting viewing experience.
Yeah,
the second time.
Yeah, I'll bet. So, I mean, you took Long Lost to, if I counted the festivals, I think it was all of them, and it did exceptionally well. Like, I mean, you've got, never mind just the nominations, but you had variously throughout all these different things, Best Feature, Best Director, Best Actor, Audience Choice Awards, Best Writer, Best Music. I mean, it got recognized for a lot of different stuff. What is your takeaway from the festival circuit that you took this movie on over the last, 18 months probably?
We've actually only been going since the autumn. We had our
okay.
first festival in September, and we just got back from North Carolina, and we have a couple more before we do our limited theatrical starting end of the month. But the takeaway, I think, is that I love engaging with audiences. I mean, our sweet spot with this movie has been really rad, mid-sized festivals who have really just appreciated the movie and opened a dialogue, and it's just been cool to talk to audiences about the movie, because again, that's a big thing for me, is just starting conversations and having people engage with art beyond just the initial viewing. So I mean, that's just been a great takeaway, is that it's regardless of where we go, it does hit people, whether we're in Oregon or Orlando.
Right.
Yeah.
So when is the theatrical run for the film?
We're starting a limited theatrical on March 29th. We're going to be in about 30 cities for a couple of weeks. Several are full week-long engagements. We have pop-up screenings in other markets as well. So I'd say it's about half week-long engagements, half pop-up screenings. We're doing 5 in Hartford. We're in New London, New Milford, Norwalk, Bridgeport, and one other place. Southbury. And hopefully a couple more by the time this is released. And we're going to be trying to do Q&As at a lot of those, and then we'll be doing an Amazon exclusive digital buy rent release starting April 10th, which is National Siblings Day, which is definitely on purpose.
Okay.
And then we'll be expanding onto more platforms after that: iTunes, Google Play, Blu-ray, DVD, things like that.
Okay.
So we're really excited to open up the world, because as many audiences as we've shared this with, it's hopefully a very small fraction compared to the amount of people that will see this movie. So we're very excited to, let the dam burst, as it were, and really start a broader dialogue.
Yeah. So when are you going to be showing this film in your hometown? It's got to make it to Newington at some point, right?
I hope so. I hope so. If not, my parents will watch it on there. No, they've seen it enough.
Yeah.
We're hoping we'll land it somewhere in Hartford too.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I did enjoy the movie. It's not generally the kind of thing I will seek out myself. I'm not much of a horror suspense thriller. That's not my genre generally. But I really did enjoy as I said, the tension and the use of the different elements in telling the story.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, we knew it wasn't going to be for everybody, nor was it meant to me. But I'm glad that even with that being the case, that you got it, and then that's great.
Oh, I think people that are just generally fans of film will be able to find pieces to enjoy from this. Whether it's their genre or not. I mean, I think without
awesome.
doubt, it's a very well made film, and it's really shot beautifully. I'm happy to recommend it to people.
Thanks, man.
So before I release you back out into the world, I would like to get a recommendation from you for other people to check something else out. It doesn't have to be related to your field. But if there's something that you've been enjoying recently that you like to recommend to other people, now's a good chance to do it.
Oh boy. At the Nasher Museum of Art at Duke University, which I don't think anybody listening to this podcast in Connecticut will probably go to, but hopefully we'll have some North Carolina listeners. There's this photography exhibit by Hugh Mangum, which is like photographs from the early 1900s that were found on like glass plates that have been digitally restored, and they're printed, and they're really, 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 really awesome.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, I don't know how many North Carolina listeners I have, but there are listeners in all 50 states.
Let's get some.
So thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Of course, man.
I appreciate it. Well, how are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling great. I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling ready to show some more audiences this movie and make the next one soon for sure.
Do you know what that one's going to be yet?
We got a couple of ideas. We got a couple.
Let's break some news. Come on.
Next time you'll bring me back. I'll talk to you when I'm in production. We'll
all right. Fair enough.
We'll do this. We'll do this again.
So where can people find you online?
I'm personally at Erik C. Bloomquist on Instagram. You can follow the movie at facebook.com/longlostmovie, facebook.com/mainframepictures, and that's also on Instagram at mainframepictures on Instagram, at mainframepics on Twitter.
Another big thank you to Erik Bloomquist for taking the time to speak with me about Long Lost. The film is available now to stream on most platforms. Cobblestone Corridor is also available on streaming platforms, so make sure to check that out too. Now, if you enjoyed that conversation, I hope you'll subscribe to the pod. That way you won't miss out on any of the exciting guests coming up in the future. And maybe even take a minute or two to rate and review the pod on your favorite podcast platform. If you'd like additional content, including early access to episodes or some behind-the-scenes access, you can head over to patreon.com/table-to-stage. You also will get discounts on all the Table to Stage merch, which includes stickers, coffee mugs, t-shirts, and even tickets to live events. The first Table to Stage Live is happening in just a few short weeks. May 22nd at CT Comedy Theater in Hartford, you can see performances by comedian Rob Santos, singer-songwriter Abby Auden, and drag queen sensations Summer Orlando and Barbara Jones Streetsand. Plus, there's lots of opportunities to interact with the show. General admission tickets are just $15 and even cheaper for Patreon members, and they are available exclusively at tabletostagepod.com/live. I hope to see lots of you there. Now, I want to thank all of the patrons for continuing to support the show, and I got to give my on-air shout-out to the two newest Patreon members, Joe and Rebecca. Thank you for jumping aboard the Patreon train, and of course, thank you to all of you for listening. That is it for now. Until next time, keep creating.